Tonight, President Obama warns the U.S. and NATO are considering a military response to the crisis in Libya as Qaddafi's forces step up attacks on rebel-held oil towns. I'm Katie Couric. The violence is driving up the price you pay at the pump. But where's the money going? Maybe not where you think. And should the U.S. tap the strategic reserve to bring prices down? They're here, the new 3D mammograms. But should women be rushing to get one? And she's worn his MIA bracelet for nearly 40 years, waiting for the day she could remove it. That day has come.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Libyan government forces were back on the offensive today, trying to retake more territory still held by the rebels. Some of the heaviest fighting was in towns near Tripoli, and the UN says more than 1 million Libyans now need humanitarian aid. President Obama warned Muammar Qaddafi and his supporters they will be held accountable for the violence, and the U.S. and its allies are still considering military options. Today, NATO planes began round-the-clock surveillance of Libya. Opposition forces in the east want NATO to ground Qaddafi's air force after it bombed several key oil towns today. Mandy Clark reports tonight from Zawiya.
This is why Libya's rebels are begging for a no-fly zone. We were the first journalists on the scene after this bombing. People ignored the danger and raced to show us the damage. He's hitting his own people with bombs, young children. He's killing them, this man says. Just minutes ago, we were driving down the road to get to the front line when a government warplane dropped 2 bombs behind us. The shrapnel from those bombs is still warm. Near the craters, the wreckage of a pickup truck. A family with 3 children was in it when Gaddafi's air force struck. 2 of the children died. The survivors were slashed by the shrapnel. The circling warplanes made for a jumpy day on the front line. Do you find that even though you're not military trained, you're gaining good ground?
Excuse me?
Are you gaining good ground?
I think there is...
What do you think's just happened?
No, I think it's... might be a plane or something. I'm not sure.
The rebels have had trouble on the ground as well. Their advance slowed by better armed government forces counterattacking to defend Gaddafi's home turf in the west. These fighters are realizing that enthusiasm alone won't get them to Tripoli. For days they advanced through town after town in eastern Libya by jumping into pickup trucks and racing to the fight with no planning whatsoever. Today, this loudspeaker truck was asking for 10 volunteers to head into a firefight down the road. A few minutes later, the message was, has anyone lost their keys? Even the fighters admit they need discipline.
They think it's a game. Yeah. You know? They don't think about what they're doing.
Strategy.
Yeah, they try and move on just like that. That's why we need a leader. We need someone to tell us, don't do that and do that.
These men are gearing up for the toughest battle yet, and they're hoping that a lot more help is on its way. On the front line, we spoke to a number of volunteers who say they're expecting more disciplined army units with heavier weapons to lead the next offensive as they make their way to Gaddafi's strongholds along the coastal road to Tripoli.
The rebels, Mandy, had a setback yesterday. Are they losing ground where you are?
Well, certainly the front line remained fairly static, although we were evacuated this morning, along with a number of civilians from the town of Ras Lanuf, which was roughly 10 miles away from the fighting. However, the rebels insist that they are ready to push forward as soon as the reinforcements arrive.
Mandy Clark reporting tonight from Zawiya, Libya. Mandy, thank you. Closer to Tripoli, Qaddafi sent tanks and artillery to retake 2 towns held by the opposition. We caution you, some of the images in Mark Phillips' report are graphic.
They're surrounded, they're under repeated attack, and they're bleeding badly. But the rebel fighters holding out in Zawiya are defiant. They're resisting a government armored assault that has more troops, bigger guns, and is shooting to kill.
Most of the shots are chest, neck, and head. It's not shoot to mime or to frighten if you frighten, you shoot in the air.
The Gaddafi regime has said it hasn't completely pushed the rebels out of Zawiya and other towns for fear of harming the civilian populations. That's not what the people in the town say.
They killing the people by snipers, civilian people. We are the resistance here, and we are stay until the liberation of whole Libya.
The regime sees a different reality, or says it does. It has virtually declared victory. Muammar Qaddafi himself insisted in a TV interview that even the casualty figures in this fight have been exaggerated.
On both sides, only 150 to 200 people were killed, but it's claimed there were thousands.
Yet even with a propaganda effort that starts very young, even in this celebrating crowd, there is dissent. A man approaches us afraid to be seen on camera. What chance do you give this rebellion?
99%.
99%?
We have a just cause. There's nothing as more powerful as an idea that's the time has come for it,
This rebellion has now reached a tipping point, both militarily and in terms of popular support. The opposition has exposed itself. It must either move forward and grow in numbers or be destroyed. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Tripoli.
Meanwhile, are you old enough to remember when gas cost $1.61 a gallon? We bet you are, because it was only about 2 years ago at the height of the recession. Now it's almost $2 higher. The biggest jump happened in the past 3 weeks. Since the revolt in Libya, gas is up 38 cents to an average of $3.52 a gallon. That reflects the rise in oil, up another $1 today to more than $105 a barrel. With pump prices rising nearly 2 cents a day, Anthony Mason reports President Obama is weighing his options.
The price run-up in the oil trading pits and the gas pumps has the White House considering tapping into the nation's emergency supply.
It's an option that's on the table.
Set up after the Arab oil boycott of 1973, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve holds 726 million barrels of crude in 4 salt caverns along the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast. It's the world's largest emergency oil reservoir, enough for the U.S. to withstand a loss of imports for more than 2 months. And only the president can authorize its use.
The statutory language that authorizes the president to make that decision is very broad.
It says the reserve may be tapped during a severe energy supply interruption that may cause an adverse impact on the national economy.
They can take the economic damage argument and use that if they want to.
But the White House has done that only twice, during the first Gulf War in 1991, and then in the wake of Hurricane Katrina in 2005. When a release of 11 million barrels helped put the brake on gas prices, which dropped from over $3 to $2.75 in less than a month. The price at the pump is now, of course, even higher.
How much of a threat are oil prices to the recovery and the economy? They're not much of a threat.
Economist Lakshman Achuthan says the U.S. economy is actually gaining strength.
The unrest in the Middle East, a spike in oil, will not derail this economy anytime soon.
And while crude production in Libya, which provides 2% of the world's oil, has been disrupted, the world is still producing more oil than it uses every day.
The loss of supply out of Libya has been made up to a certain extent with an increase of supply from Saudi Arabia.
Why then are oil and gas prices soaring again?
Well, the explanation is it's unbridled investment money that is dominating a market to the point where supply and demand doesn't matter anymore.
Sean Koda, who heads an oil industry group, says pension and hedge funds have been pouring into the oil market.
The other trades in crude oil.
Bidding up the price. In fact, last week, 2/3 of all the oil traded was bought or sold not by oil companies, but by investors.
The total world energy supply is bought and sold every day about 8 times.
Oil and gas prices are not expected to retreat until the unrest ebbs in the Middle East, and analysts say that could take months. Katie.
Really interesting. Anthony Mason. Anthony, thank you. In other news, military trials will resume for terror suspects held at Guantanamo. President Obama today lifted the ban he imposed 2 years ago. 172 detainees are still being held at Guantanamo, and the president has promised to close the prison. But Congress has blocked his efforts to have them tried in civilian courts here in the U.S. And still ahead on the CBS Evening News, mammograms in 3D, the new screening for breast cancer. But up next, for the first time in the Catholic Church child abuse scandal, a high-ranking American priest faces criminal charges. The Catholic Church sex abuse scandal is not going away. In Philadelphia, a man who says he was molested as a child sued the archdiocese today. And Elaine Quijano reports that for the first time, a high-ranking American church official is facing criminal charges.
Phil Goen can't bring himself to talk about it in detail, but says when he was a teenager, he was sexually abused by a Catholic priest.
Nobody should have to deal with what I've dealt with for 15 years, the way that I felt, and no child should ever have to go through this again.
After years of silence, Goen is publicly filing suit against top officials in the Philadelphia Archdiocese. One of those named in his civil lawsuit is Monsignor William Lynn. Lynn is already facing charges in a separate criminal case. For 12 years, Lynn was in charge of recommending work assignments for priests in the Philadelphia Archdiocese. The district attorney believes Lynn knowingly recommended abusive priests be reassigned without ever warning the parishes.
And they did, in fact, reoffend. They did, in fact, rape and sodomize other children.
Monsignor Lynn has now become the first high-ranking U.S. church official ever to face criminal child endangerment charges for allegedly covering up abuse. But prosecutors say there are other problems. Allegations against Lynn resulted from a 124-page grand jury report that concludes apparent abusers, dozens of them we believe, remain on duty in the archdiocese today, with open access to new young prey. For now, the archdiocese has suspended 3 priests, but according to the report, 34 others accused of abuse or inappropriate behavior with minors remain in active ministry. The archdiocese has hired a former prosecutor to re-examine past cases.
I will not turn my back on evidence of a cover-up.
The archdiocese is not commenting on the recent legal action, but church officials have vowed to do better.
We have now taken action, and we hope that our actions speak to our resolve.
That's little comfort to Phil Goen, who hopes by coming forward, he's giving children the protection he never had. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, Philadelphia.
In other news, she was called Mexico's bravest woman last year. Just 20 years old, she took a job no one else wanted, police chief in a violent border town. Today, Marisol Valles Garcia was fired for abandoning her post after getting death threats. She had taken a leave of absence last week to visit the U.S., but failed to report back to work today. Also fired, Charlie Sheen. Warner Brothers Television today terminated his contract to star in 2.5 Men. Last week, production of this season's remaining episodes was canceled after Sheen's rant against the producer. Warner Brothers says no decision has been made about the future of the sitcom. And still ahead, 3D mammography, the latest in breast cancer screening, is here. The mammogram is one of the most important weapons in the fight against breast cancer. About 40 million are performed in the U.S. every year, detecting 80 to 90% of all breast cancers. Now, a new advance. A woman in Boston today became the first American to have a mammogram using 3D technology since it was approved by the FDA last month. Here's Dr. Jennifer Ashton.
5 years ago, it took several mammograms and weeks of waiting before Laura Lang was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 50. Today, she's hoping a new test is better.
Breathe. This machine for me is such a huge advance. It's something that everybody should know about.
Lang is getting a new type of mammogram that gives doctors a 3-dimensional view of the breast.
Good, you may breathe. Now we have the ability not to just look at the breast, but actually to look through and around structures we weren't able to see before. This is the picture of what a cancer looks like.
Compared to the traditional 2D image, studies found it increases a doctor's ability to spot cancer by 7%. The 3D mammogram also reduces the number of women called back when a result is unclear.
So it's going to help us both find more cancers and decrease these number of false positive callbacks. And so that's huge.
But some critics say it's more hype than help. The 3D mammogram uses more radiation than a traditional mammogram. It's expected to be more expensive, though the cost won't be set until it's widely available.
Most importantly, it hasn't been shown to save more lives. So we love new technology, and we keep piling it on without a clear understanding of what the benefits are.
Right now, the 3D mammogram is only available at Massachusetts General Hospital, but it is expected to be introduced at other medical centers nationwide this year, Katie.
And when they are, should women ask for 3D mammograms?
Well, right now, this technology is approved by the FDA, but not yet recommended by major cancer groups or women's health groups. And it also, the radiologists need time to be trained in this new imaging technique. All of that takes time. So until then, this is a conversation a woman should have with her doctor.
All right. Dr. Jennifer Ashton, thank you so much. And for more information, you can go to our partner in health news, WebMD.com, and search mammogram. Meanwhile, nearly a decade after 9/11, we have a new perspective on the attack here in New York. This video was taken from a police helicopter hovering near the burning Twin Towers. The officers on board had hoped to rescue survivors from the rooftops, but the smoke made it too dangerous. One officer shouted as the first tower fell.
It's gone! It's the whole tower! They knocked the whole freaking thing down!
The video was released today by the federal agency that investigated the collapse of the towers. And coming up next, she wore his name on her wrist since Vietnam. Now, he's finally coming home.
Tonight's Assignment America is sponsored by Aleve. 2 pills, all day strong, all day long.
We end with a child of the 70s, all grown up now, and the vigil she's kept for 4 decades for a missing American hero. A vigil that's about to come to an end. Here's Steve Hartman with tonight's Assignment America.
While the war raged in Vietnam, back home, these became all the rage. Metal bracelets sold by the millions, each bearing the name of a soldier who was either still a prisoner in Vietnam or missing in action. The idea was to wear the bracelet and only take it off when your vet came home. The bracelets were especially popular with kids, like this 12-year-old girl from Fremont, California, who got a bracelet in her Christmas stocking in 1972.
Do you remember getting it?
Yeah, I was real excited. I put it on right away. I read the little piece of paper that came with it, and just thought I'm going to keep it on until it comes home.
Kathy Strong, now 50, still remembers the name, too. James Moreland. Moreland was a Green Beret who'd been stationed in Long Vey.
North Vietnamese troops attacked the outpost of Long Vey.
He went missing in the winter of '68 after the enemy overtook his position. At the time, no one knew much more than that, so Kathy remained optimistic.
Well, they showed footage back in the day of the soldiers coming off the planes, and I always thought, wherever he's flying into, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to give him my bracelet and have him put it on his arm, and that's how I always pictured it. But that wasn't meant to be.
After so many years, it became obvious to even the most hopeful that everyone who could come home alive had come home alive. And so eventually, the bracelets went the way of the pet rock.
This is 1976.
However,
I see it.
As her photos can attest,
78.
There it is.
Kathy wore her bracelet much longer than most.
2001, camping.
In fact, James Moreland's name has been on her wrist every day, without exception, for the past 38 years.
Never has been off?
Nope. I just wanted to keep the promise.
At this point, Kathy says keeping the promise means wearing the bracelet until Moreland's remains are found and returned.
I knew we had family out there that was, waiting for word, and I thought I'm just going to wait along with him.
To have worn his bracelet for so long, we just love her to death.
Anita and Linda are James Moreland's sisters and closest surviving relatives. When they heard about Kathy a few years ago, they asked to meet her.
She did care. and she still does care.
No doubt about that.
When you think about someone every day, you just can't help it. You know, it's usually when I have my hands out in front of me, you know, maybe I'm driving the car or typing on the keyboard, and I see that name and I just think, you know, I wonder when he's coming home.
She's now been wondering almost 4 decades, but no more.
He's finally coming home.
In January, James Moreland's sisters got word that their brother's remains had been found and identified. In May, he'll be buried here, between their mother and father, in a full military funeral.
You're going to go?
Yes.
You're going to take the bracelet off?
Yeah. I'm going to remove the bracelet and have it buried with him.
The family has invited me to attend that service so I can bring it to you, which I thought was quite an honor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, I remember when those were really popular when I was in junior high, but she took it very seriously, and it's
really
so touching. She never took it off, Steve, ever?
Never. She even had to have surgery on her wrist once, and she waited till she could find a doctor who would do the surgery and let her keep the bracelet on.
Wow, that's a really moving story. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Kitty Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.